Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. You can tell from the title up there, I'm continuing my trek through the film era known as the Disney Renaissance. This is the entry from 1994, and one of the first films I remember seeing in theaters. That, of course, is The Lion King. This is directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff, with a screenplay that was written by multiple people, and one of the people involved, of course, is Linda Woolverton, and starring the vocal talents of Matthew Broderick, Jonathan Taylor-Thomas, Jeremy Irons, James Earl Jones, Nathan Lane, among others, with a score by Hans Zimmer, and of course, songs written by the team of Tim Rice and Elton John. This film was made for $45 million, and it made $978.8 million. Now, of course, given its re-releases over the years, that's probably a factor in there, but even without that, it's made its budget many times over. So even with marketing and all that, which I don't know how often they factor marketing into the production cost. I think that's usually a back-end cost. You know, Hollywood accounting, as I often bring up. It was still a hit. Now, I'm going to give the abridged version of how I remember seeing this. It was, me and my grandmother went to the movies, saw it, and I only remember like bits and pieces of it, like in the lobby and then out in the lot. And for ages, I did not remember where we actually went to the theaters, other than it was somewhere in Marietta, Temecula. And then one time when me and my friend were out there, we drove into a part of the parking lot I hadn't been to in a long time, and I'm like, wait a minute. This is one of those things where you see something and it just triggers a memory, and you're like, I know where I'm at. This is where that theater was. That must be that big building right there. That must be it. Anyone's wondering, if you're familiar with the Temecula area out here in SoCal, it's when you get to the southern part of Temecula, over where the Target is, over there. Now, an interesting thing about this film is that the origin of the concept seems to be in dispute. And given you look at the story credit and you're like, dang, so many cooks in the kitchen, you can see why. Having read some of this for this part of the video, I think it's a little bit of everything. It's just that the concept evolved so many times over it to get to the final concept that worked, that the screenwriters ended up taking the best ideas and creating like a Frankenstein type thing. And while sometimes that can be bad, in this case it turned out to be good. Now, if we go based on Charles Fink, who in the Renaissance era, in the pre-Renaissance era, was the Walt Disney Features Animation Vice President for Creative Affairs, say that 5 times fast, he approached Jeffrey Katzenberg, Roy E. Disney, and Peter Schneider with an idea to do Bambi in Africa, but it's going to be with lions. And according to him, Katzenberg was like, which, given what we know about Katzenberg during the Renaissance and afterwards, is not a stretch. But he told Fink, yeah, work on the idea and get back to me. And other ones, it was conceived during a conversation with Katzenberg, Disney, and Schneider on a flight, which, given the nature of Hollywood, I can also see that, but it could also be that a couple ideas were just spitballed. The setting in Africa came up, and it went back and forth. And of course, in '88, Thomas Dish, the author of Brave Little Toaster, met with him. Ideas kept going back and forth, and then they did a 9-page treatment entitled The King of Kalahari. And then by '89, Disney staff writers, including Jenny Tripp, Tim Disney, Valerie West, amongst others, had written treatments for the project. And they just kept going from there, and they had other ideas like the Prince Lion, who Simba at this point had been chosen as a name, was raised by baboons, mongooses, and he battled an evil jackal. But a lot of these ideas, they just can get right. And given how for both Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, they actually had to go back, steal a line from Spider-Man, back to formula and make the ideas better, you can kind of see why a lot of these ideas and treatments probably got the axe right away. And of course, Linda Woolverton, who was writing Beauty and the Beast, around this time. She spent a year writing several drafts, and of course at this point it was called The King of Beasts and then King of the Jungle. And around this time, it was a battle between lions and baboons, and the character that would eventually evolve into Scar being the leader of the baboons, character that was Rafiki being a cheetah, and Timon and Pumbaa being Simba's childhood friends, which, given what we see in Aladdin, I'm kind of sensing a pattern there. And other little differences, but they changed, and of course Woolverton, she's still attached to the project when it comes to being credited, but it seems like her idea here kind of fell by the wayside. And as they went through it, they eventually got to the final concept. And part of that was after Woolverton left to go work on the Broadway adaptation of Beauty and the Beast. And that's when Allers, Minkoff met with multiple other screenwriters. I mean, funny enough, we even got Billy Bob Thornton and Josh Whedon in here. Whedon kind of makes sense considering this is an era where he was a major script doctor, but Billy Bob Thornton intrigues me. I'm trying to imagine how this film would be if he'd actually written it. And of course, this is where we get our credited screenwriters here. We get Irene Mecchi and Jonathan Roberts that get thrown in there. And we finally get our final script. Now, I have to address the elephant in the room here, and that is, for years, there was the whole talk about this film plagiarizing the anime that in America is known as Kimba the White Lion. I know it has a different name in Japan, if I remember right. I think it's like something Leo. Forgive me that I don't have the name in my notes and having all that. Funny thing is, this whole thing's not even on Wikipedia anymore. It's not even mentioned on IMDb, so I don't know. That means it just got dropped and it's no longer a thing, but I feel I have to address it. Now, I'm just going to point this out here. I don't think the film knowingly plagiarized Kimba the White Lion. I don't really know a lot about it because I have not watched Kimba the White Lion. I only know about it because on the Pokemon VHSs I had when I was a kid, which I still do own, a couple of them are over there. I'll bring up my camera real quick because I'm trying to see if you guys can actually see that. No, you can't. It's blocked by the chair. Well, on the after the episodes on them, they would have some trailers. One, of course, being the old school Generation 1 Pokemon trailer where the bus driver, and then the trailer for the Ramna 1/2 film, and of course the one for Kimba the White Lion. That's how I first heard of that. When I saw that originally, I thought, what is this, some Lion King ripoff? And of course, years later find out it's older than Lion King. But other than the fact it's set in Africa, has a lion character, it seems like it's like superficial to the point where you could say that some of the animators in the designs were inspired by the show because they probably would have grown up with it rather than copying it wholesale. Because we'd have to look at the plot and there'd have to be a lot of similar plot beats to go with the whole plagiarism thing. I'd say you have more saying that a certain Michael Bay film plagiarized a certain low-budget film than this plagiarizing Kimbo. That's just from what little I know about it. I could be wrong. But the fact that I didn't really see any serious lawsuits come up, or at least the fact that people would still talk about it other than like superficial stuff, I'd say that anything is probably inspiration on the animators' parts. But like I said, it's something I gotta bring up, or else it's an elephant that'd be staring at me from the room and be like, he's right there. I gotta bring it up. That being said, if there is any story that The Lion King takes a lot of inspiration of, and I don't know how much of this is intentional and how much of this is just a coincidence here, that would be William Shakespeare's Hamlet. Which is why when I originally reviewed this film several years ago, I did it when I was reviewing a couple other Hamlet films, because in the class I just taken, we just covered Hamlet. So it's still fresh in my mind, so I decided to do a review series of it. And if you want to see my thoughts on the play, and then on the three major films I covered, which of course were the three best known adaptations of it, they're still on the channel if you want to go watch them. And I actually do have an idea for a video essay that I plan on doing pretty soon involving one of the major questions from that play. Now, the notes it takes from it, of course, is the prince being usurped by his uncle and him essentially trying to right what's wrong after being visited by the ghost of his father. And Now, the plot, it's there in broad strokes. That's why I say inspired and not a direct adaptation. Although you could probably argue it's an unofficial adaptation of Hamlet. There's other notes, like he has two best friends, which are essentially comic relief. Hamlet, it's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Here it's Timon and Pumbaa. And of course, he has a love interest. Of course, considering Hamlet's a tragedy, you can kind of guess that that relationship ends in a different way. And unlike Hamlet, we don't see Nala's father. There's a lot of actual Lion Pride jokes there, which I'm not going to make here. They kind of write themselves. And there's not really a analog in the film for Fortinbras or even Norway and all that. And so it's like not a, so you see it's not a complete one. And if I remember right, Hamlet doesn't really have an equivalent to what the hyenas would be because Claudius, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while. I'm trying to remember if I have the names right. Hamlet's uncle doesn't really have a, I think I had the name right, Claudius does not have henchmen in that one. I mean, technically has all the people that the king would work, but there's no one that you would say would be yes men other than, of course, Ophelia's father, but that's a different type of role than the hyenas. Now, getting on there, the plot of the film is it takes place in Africa, in a place called the Pride Lands. It's a kingdom that's ruled over by King Mufasa, who is the king of a lion pride. And the film opens, of course, this is a scene everyone knows about, if you've never seen the film, where the sun's coming up and you hear that native African chap, Savannah, I probably butchered that pronunciation. And you see all the animals gathering. Even on the small screen, this is a beautiful moment of animation. I would love to imagine it, even though I don't have a direct memory of seeing that part of it as a kid, but I know just watching this must have made me go giddy in the theaters watching it. And of course, it's probably also part of the reason the film was a hit, scenes like this. The opening scene is King Mufasa and his Queen Sarabi presenting their newborn son and heir Simba to the Pride Lands. Now, immediately after this, we're introduced to Mufasa's younger brother, Scar, who covets the throne. He's a very dark character, and I don't just mean that because of his mane. He's broody, he's jealous, he hates his brother, but since he's not physically imposing like his brother, he can't directly challenge him to overthrow him, so he has to scheme, he has to connive. And he plots with hyenas to get rid of both Mufasa and Simba so he could become the king of the Pride Lands. Now, the first plot to do that, where he basically nudges Simba to go to the elephant graveyard where the hyenas live, goes awry. So he sets up a trap, which successfully kills Mufasa, but fails to kill Simba. So Simba gets scared off, he vanishes, and he meets Timon and Pumbaa, who are his best friends, and they're out there chilling, means no worries, that whole thing. Years later, he meets Nala, his childhood friend, who tells him, hey, since you've been gone, Scar has been king and he has ruined the Pride Lands. Now, at first, Simba does not want to accept his responsibility, so he is shirking his destiny, trying to stop from crossing that threshold. But he is nudged along, first, a little bit, by one of his father's best friends, Rafiki the Mandrill, and then, of course, later by the ghost of his father. Now, where it was in Hamlet, it's, avenge me. This one, it's more, remember who you are, accept your destiny. That's an epic scene. There's a reason why it's brought up a lot, especially in the 90s. You are my son, and the one true king. This is a great testament to how James Earl Jones had that excellent voice. I mean, Darth Vader, everyone's always going to remember him as Darth Vader, but Disney fans are also going to remember him as Mufasa, just the right enunciation and tone for that scene, and of course the animation, and of course the score by Hans Zimmer, that really does help in here. Because we could think about the score in a lot of these Disney Renaissance films, and there are moments that really stand out to me, like moments of Beauty and the Beast, and a little bit in Aladdin, but a lot of the score moments by Hans Zimmer in this film really stand out to me. And watching the film again made me remember why. I think part of it is also because, unlike those other ones, I actually had the soundtrack on audio cassette, and I actually still do have it somewhere. I just don't know offhand where it is. I don't know if it's in the closet. I don't know if it's down there, but it was a fun one to always watch, always listen to. Just like the film was always fun to watch. Of course, film ends with Simba accepting his destiny, that he can no longer shirk it, going home, reclaiming the throne, battling Scar, and this is an epic scene, animated beautifully, and I love the fact that it is a slow motion fight, set with the epic fight score, and of course Simba reclaims the throne, and ends with the cycle continuing, or as they put in here, the circle of life continuing. And I do like the way they explain the circle of life in this film, to where every life form is connected. So it's the circle of life is like the food chain. Every part of it is connected to another. Instead of a up and down thing, it's like a circle, which makes a little bit more sense. It's like, just because the lions eat everything else doesn't mean they'd be on the top of a food chain thing. I mean, they'd be an apex predator. But of course, like Mufasa explains it, when they die, their body becomes a grass, which is then in turn eaten by the animals they eat. So everything is connected. And of course, we see when Scar takes over, everything gets disconnected. As Mufasa says, it's a delicate balance. So Scar disrupts that balance. And I also think it goes back to the whole Arthurian thing of the king, whereas the king and the land are one. And then if the balance between one gets disrupted, and the balance between them, then everything gets disrupted. If you've ever seen Excalibur from the early 80s, we see a little bit of this when Arthur is disconnected, and then when he finally gets his motivation back in the final part of the film, how as he goes by the land and starts to recover. Same kind of principle when it comes to Scar as king and then Simba reclaiming it. Of course, you can also say that Scar and the hyenas really killing the land with how they hunt kind of shows why there's only a certain number of predators per prey, but that's going a little meta there, but kind of makes sense with it. Like I've already brought up the score by Hans Zimmer, excellent. Now the songs, written of course by Tim Rice and Elton John. I know it's a weird little combination there, but it works for the songs here. And one thing I'll say that the songs in this film have over the previous film is that you can tell there is that writing team continuity. I mean, not to say that the songs in Aladdin are bad, but like I even mentioned there, is that you can kind of tell there's a little bit of a disconnect between certain songs. Then when you find out it's different writing teams, you're like, ah. It's kind of like when you listen to a band where different members of the band write different songs, you can kind of tell them. Like I know for older rock fans with Beatles, you can usually tell what is a McCarthy-Lennon composition and what was written by the others. For me, I'm going to go with one of my favorite bands, Iron Maiden. You can usually tell, especially if you listen to it long enough, without even having to look at the credits. Oh, okay, this is an Adrian Smith heavy song. This is a Steve Harris song. Oh, Bruce Dickinson had to say in the writing of the lyrics of this one. The more recent one, the Yannick had this one, or this is a Adrian Dickinson combo one. Or, Harris didn't really seem to have a lot of influence on this part of the album. You can start to notice like the patterns in their songwriting and be like, oh yeah. Same thing with there. And here, you can definitely tell that Elton and Tim really were a good match when it comes to writing the songs. And of course, Elton, being the fact he was a popular musician, still is, he is the one that did the single versions of it. Now, doing the Can You Feel the Love Tonight one makes sense. I do find it weird that he did versions of I Can't Wait to Be King and Circle of Life. But they are also good songs, his renditions of them. Although I'll say I like Circle of Life better than I Just Can't Wait to Be King, because that one makes more sense for a popular song one. And of course, there's like subtle differences in the lyrics, just like with Can You Feel the Love Tonight? And a lot of the songs, of course, there's really, even though we remember this as a musical, there's only 5 songs in the original version of the film. Circle of Life, great opening number, great vocals by Carmen Twilly and Le Bohème. I Just Can't Wait to Be King, good character one, and follows a little note about the character motivations that I mentioned in the previous videos. Really lays it out. Be Prepared, excellent villain song, sung mainly by Jeremy Irons, but I guess a little story that you've been waiting for me to mention, the fact that he kind of blew out his voice when he was doing the part that goes, "You won't get a sniff without me!" Which, you listen to that take, you're like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound safe for the voice. I'm guessing multiple takes of that probably ruined it. And then, of course, Jim Cummings, a legendary voice actor, had to take over. It's one thing that I never noticed the first few times I watched the film, but ever since I learned that factoid and I listened to it, you can tell. I mean, Jim is good at matching Jeremy's voice, but there's little subtleties in the little darker parts of his voice that you can tell it's Jim Cummings. Because it's very similar to his other deep voice characters. That you're like, oh yeah, that's Jim. And of course we got Hakuna Matata, the Timon and Pumbaa song. Really lays out their whole thing. You gotta have a little comic relief song in there. And then of course the love song, the film version of Can You Feel the Love Tonight. Great little thing. Now apparently originally it was all supposed to be sung by Timon and Pumbaa. I think that would have been a bad choice narratively. So I'm glad that they only have the opening and ending part of it. And then after that, no more musical numbers. And I do like that. Because I think any more musical numbers after that, at least in the film version, kind of would have felt inappropriate. Pacing and tone-wise. I have not watched the Broadway version of it, so I don't know if there's any more musical numbers in it after that, but once you get to you could, on stage, that's a little bit more forgivable. Here, a little bit harder. And even though it's been ages, I have watched the re-release with the Morning Report. That song just always felt off to me, and then watching the scene again without it, it's like, yeah, that scene, it's good for like a nice little moment, but I think not having the song there like how it was, yeah. Broadway probably makes a little bit more sense. Now, since I brought it up, because of how popular it was, it did get a Broadway musical, which I've seen bits and pieces of it, just little scenes, and I do say the way that they decided to translate certain things, like the Stampede, perfect, because it seems like that, it's like, which, I'll get to that in a second, like, how do you translate that story-wise from a 2D animation to Broadway? It's just the logistics of it, the way they've managed to figure it out. Beautiful. And I do want to watch it one of these days. Now, the animation, lovely. A lot of excellent animation. Like I mentioned, the opening scene, and of course the colors on I Just Can't Wait to Be King. I like how they get a little bit more brighter, which makes sense. It's mainly a song sung by 2 children, and essentially one of the child's assistant to their father. And of course a little bit of that also goes with Hakuna Matata. Then of course when the colors have to be like a little bit darker, it's not afraid to go there. And there is comedy in there, so the animation does serve it as well. Like I already mentioned, the voice acting, excellent all across the board. And the tone, it does mix the tone a bit. There's moments that are comedic, moments that are dark. I mean, Mufasa's death, one of those scenes that really can scar children if they watch it at the right moment. And just the way everything's set together, you can never not hear Jeremy Irons' voice without thinking, "Long live the king." And then of course just the way they animated Scar when he's walking along, watching to see what's going to happen down there. I just love that shot of him. And of course, like I mentioned, even though there's no more musical numbers in the latter half of the film, there is still a little bit of comedy. I mean, there's the one moment everyone always brings up, "What do you want me to do? Dress a dragon, do the hula? Luau!" Good little moment for distraction there. And of course, Nathan Lane, perfect voice for that moment. And of course, now it's time to bring up some of the trivia from IMDb. Apparently all the line roars were provided by Frank Welker. legendary voice actor. Now, part of the reason for that is they wanted a specific sound for each line roar, which I get, kind of personalizing everything. Now, going back to the musical numbers real quick for this one, is that a few weeks before the film opened, Elton was given a special screening, and he saw that the film's love song had been left out. Now, this really stinks of Katzenberg thinking like, yeah, we need to cut that out. Kids don't need that. They're not going to want that. Kind of like how he did with the Muppet Christmas Carol, where he had When Love Is Gone cut out, which really hurts the flow of that scene. And this is one of the reasons why I'm like Katzenberg. I mean, he can have genius moments, but then he has stupid moments, because I think that part of the film would have suffered if Elton John had not successfully lobbied to have it put back in. Especially since Can You Feel the Love Tonight ended up winning an Oscar for Best Original Song. So it shows sometimes that the producers have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Because if they had left that out, Oscar would not have been won for that. Maybe for the end credit one, but then we would have had a moment like we did with the next film where we're like, wait a minute, this is not a film that's in the movie. And of course it would have also made a weird little jump thing like, this romance doesn't seem like it's earned within the context of this scene. And the little fun things, as I mentioned, the animation, is that the team working on the film was the supposed Disney B team, who were kept busy while the A team worked on Pocahontas, a production which they had much higher hopes. Now, of course, both films were a success, but it seems like Lion King is looked at more favorably in retrospect than Pocahontas is, and I think part of that is because Pocahontas adapted the source material, to put it, which I'm not going to really jump into that one here, other than saying that the reviews for it weren't as good as Lion King, even though they were still decent, and didn't make as much money. So there's that. But all the rest of the stuff for Pocahontas, we're going to leave that for the next video. And like I mentioned, the Stampede, that took them 3 years to animate, and part of it was with CG. And looking at it, well worth the effort, because it makes for a very perilous little action beat in the film. And of course, combined with the score, voice acting, everything, makes it for an excellent scene. And there's not really much else to say about The Lion King. It is an excellent addition to the Disney Renaissance. If there's any moment I probably should address here, it is when Simba goes to first confront Scar, is that it does seem a little weird that he's all confident he's going to confront him, that the moment his uncle brings up what happened, that how he blamed himself for the death, or he thought it was his responsibility, that he almost gets thrown off Pride Rock by Scar and the hyenas. I could say part of that is the whole thing, like, you build up your confidence, but then when you're in the moment, just because they say something, you lose your confidence in the moment. Especially since it's in front of everybody, he hadn't mentioned it yet to Nala, so it doesn't strike me as a bad little moment like some people, Doug Walker, make it out to be. But that's just me looking at it. All in all, Lion King, excellent film. Great animation, great music. I'd say for me personally, I don't know if it's my second favorite. It's definitely, if I were to do like a top 5 of these films, it'd be in there. But then again, with the Renaissance, it's kind of hard to do one other than me saying my favorite out of all of them is Beauty and the Beast. But it would definitely be easily in the running for like the third and second spot. And of course, since I already brought it up, next time we're going to be talking about probably the most divisive, or polarizing, probably a more accurate one, entry in the Disney Renaissance. Of course, that's going to be Pocahontas, and that'll be next time, everybody.